I want you to try a quick visualization exercise with me, just for a second.
Okay, I'm in.
Walk through your house in your mind. You know, you're in the living room, that's for relaxing. The kitchen, that's for gathering, maybe creating.
Right.
The bedroom is for sleeping. Now, picture the bathroom.
Hmm.
If you're like 99% of people, that mental image just shifted, didn't it? It went from living space to, well, maintenance station?
Yeah, it's the default setting for sure. For the last century or so, modern architecture has pretty much treated the bathroom as a machine for hygiene.
A machine for hygiene. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's all about plumbing efficiency, waterproof surfaces.
Yeah.
But we're looking at something different today. We're diving into a collection of essays in architectural studies. It's called Sanctuaries of Light, the Art of Restorative Bathrooms.
Okay.
And the argument here is that we have completely misunderstood the purpose of this room.
I have to be honest, when I first saw that title, my skepticism radar went off a little. Restorative bathrooms. It sounds a bit like real estate marketing fluff, you know? The kind of thing used to sell overpriced condos.
It's a totally fair question.
Is there actually something substantive here, or are we just using fancy words for expensive tile?
No, and that's the key, because the industry is full of that fluff. But this text isn't talking about luxury in terms of like gold-plated faucets or heated toilet seats.
Right.
It's digging into the psychology of space. The core premise is that the bathroom is the only room in the house where you are guaranteed privacy and solitude. So if you design it correctly, it stops being a utility room and becomes a mechanism for emotional regulation.
So it's less about the hardware and more about the biology of the person standing in the room.
Precisely. It's about how the environment signals your nervous system to downshift. The text argues that interior design, specifically light, texture, and scale, can physically alter your cortisol levels.
Okay, let's test that. The source starts with this idea. It calls the first sensation. It argues that in a standard bathroom, your first sensation is visual. You see the sink, you see the mirror, you check if it's clean.
Yep.
But in a restorative bathroom, the first sensation should be emotional.
That's the blink moment. Before your neocortex even identifies that as a bathtub, your limbic system, your emotional center, should already be reacting. The text describes it as a signal of calm, privacy, and restoration. It's the difference between walking into a sterile clinic and walking into, say, a quiet forest glade. One puts you on alert, the other invites you to just exhale.
I like that exhale image, but how do you actually build an exhale? Because most people listening, you know, they aren't building a custom home in the hills of Malibu.
Of course.
They might have a standard 5x8 bathroom. Does this first sensation theory even apply when you're working with limited square footage?
I think it matters more in small spaces, actually. The text brings up this concept of the pause versus the pass-through. A pass-through space is designed for a speed space. Think of a hallway or a mudroom. High contrast, bright lights, narrow paths. But a pause space that requires what the author calls proprioceptive calm.
Proprioceptive calm. Okay, that sounds technical. Break that down.
Proprioception is just your body's awareness of itself in space. So if a room feels tight or cluttered or sharp, your body actually braces itself.
You tense up.
You tense up. You might not notice it consciously, but you are. The text suggests that to create a pause, you need generous layouts and open circulation.
Which brings us right back to the size issue. Generous layout sounds great if you have the footage. If you don't, are you just out of luck?
Not at all. This is where the art of scale comes in. The Force emphasizes what it calls breathing room between elements.
Breathing room.
Yeah. In a small bathroom, this is really about visual ergonomics. For example, instead of a vanity that goes all the way to the floor and just look like this heavy block,
Right, I know exactly what you mean.
you might use a floating vanity. Just seeing the floor extend underneath it tricks the brain into perceiving more ground. It's about creating lines of sight that aren't interrupted.
So it's just reducing the visual noise so the brain doesn't feel crowded.
That's it exactly. A specific metric they mention in the architectural notes is clearance. We usually look at code compliance. Is there 21 inches in front of the toilet?
A bare minimum.
The bare minimum. But the text suggests for a restorative feel, you want 30 inches or more of perceived space.
Oh.
It validates the act of slowing down because you aren't subconsciously worried about bumping your elbow.
That makes perfect sense. It's like traffic planning for your nervous system. Okay, so once you've established the space, the source pivots to what fills it. And the title of the collection is Sanctuaries of Light. So clearly, this is the heavy hitter.
Light is the primary tool. And this is where most residential bathrooms fail. Miserably.
Oh, yeah. The classic interrogation room vibe. 4 bright bulbs over the mirror that show you every single pore and flaw at 6 a.m.
That is the one. It wakes you up, sure, but it triggers a stress response. The text uses this beautiful phrase, light shouldn't rush in, it should settle gently.
Settle gently. That sounds poetic, but, mechanically, what is actually happening there?
It's talking about diffusion and direction. Direct light is harsh. It creates these hard shadows. Restorative light is diffused.
Softer.
Much softer.
Yeah.
The source discusses the physics of how light enters a room. Ideally, you want D-light filtering from above, like through clear-story windows or skylights, or maybe bouncing off walls. When light hits a textured wall and scatters, it softens the edges of the whole room.
But we also have to deal with the time of day. I mean, a bathroom has to work at 7 a.m. when you're getting ready for work and at 10 p.m. when you're trying to wind down. Those are two totally opposing biological needs.
And that's the circadian aspect of design.
Yeah.
The source is very specific about layered lighting. You can't rely on one switch. For the morning, you need higher Kelvin temperatures, that cooler blue range light that suppresses melatonin and helps you wake up. But, and this is key, it still needs to be diffused, not blinding.
And for the evening.
That's where it gets really interesting. When the daylight fades, you shift to what they call indirect illumination. So think of light hidden in coves, or under the vanity, that toe kick lighting, or behind a mirror.
So you see the effect of the light, but not the bulb itself.
Exactly. And the text advises dropping the temperature to warm ranges, 2700 Kelvin or even lower, and keeping the source hidden.
So no performative lighting, no giant chandelier screaming for attention.
Never. The rule in the text is absolute. Lighting in these spaces is never harsh or performative. It's there to support the atmosphere. If the light makes you squint, or if it dominates the room, it has failed. It breaks the pause.
It seems like the goal is to create an environment that feels almost ancient, or timeless maybe, which leads perfectly into the section on materiality. There's a quote here that really stopped me in my tracks.
Let me guess. Texture is not decoration. It is atmosphere.
That's the one.
I highlighted that too. We often think of texture as just the surface finish. Is it smooth or is it rough? But this text argues that texture provides the emotional weight of the room.
Give me an example of emotional weight.
Okay, take stone. The text details stone not just as a durable material, but as something that provides permanence and quiet strength. When you step onto a honed limestone floor or you touch a slate wall, there's a thermal mass there. It feels cool, it's solid, it grounds you.
It contrasts with the ephemeral nature of water or the rush of the day.
That's the balance, exactly. And you contrast that cold, heavy stone with natural finishes like wood or unpolished ceramics, which introduce warmth. The source warns against what it calls the glossy white box effect.
Which is pretty much the standard rental bathroom. White tile, white tub, white sink.
It's hygienic, but it's emotionally sterile. It reflects light way too quickly. So the text advocates for subtly irregular wall treatments, maybe a lime wash or a tile-like plaster or a textured tile.
Why does that irregularity matter so much?
Because of how it interacts with that settling light we just talked about. If you shine a light on a perfectly flat, glossy wall, you get a glare.
Right.
But if you shine it on a textured plaster wall, you get these little micro shadows. The wall seems to have depth. And as the sun moves across the sky, or as you dim the lights at night, the wall actually changes. It creates a dynamic yet calming experience. The room feels alive.
That brings us to what was, for me, the most radical part of the text. We're talking about the room being alive, and the source takes that literally with the section on nature as presence.
Dissolving boundaries. This is a huge trend in high-end restorative design, but the principles can apply broadly. The idea is simple. The bathroom shouldn't be a bunker sealed off from the world. It should connect to the elements.
I see the appeal, I do, but I also see the neighbor across the alley. The privacy paradox is a real thing. How do you dissolve boundaries without ending up on the neighborhood watch list?
It definitely requires extremely thoughtful spatial planning. You're not just putting a clear glass window next to the shower facing the street.
I would hope not.
No, you use layered boundaries. The text describes using high walls to create a small private courtyard just outside the bathroom. Or using frosted glass that lets in the light and, the shadow of swaying leaves, but it blocks the actual view.
Is your space recharging you, or is it subtly draining you? Because that little room might be having a bigger impact on your life than you think. Thanks for deep diving with us. We'll see you next time.